Welcome to Leading from Being with host Marty Spiegelman and Todd Hoskins. Together they weave original human wisdom, play with language, and explore leadership and consciousness to help you create more thriving people, teams, organizations, and communities. Together they wrap up their series entitled The Problem with Problems, discussing deeper dynamics, people's capacity to respond to what is happening that lies far beyond problems and solutions. Stick around for takeaways and an essay on potentialities from Marty. Get show notes and much more at leadingfrombeing.com.
Hello and welcome to Leading from Being. My name is Todd Hoskins and I'm here with my friend and colleague Marty Spiegelman. Hi, Marty.
Hey, Todd, good to be with you. And hello to all of our listeners. We're very excited today to wrap up our series on the problem with problems. It's gotten a lot of attention and we have great things to say today. So, Todd, why don't you lead us into our discussion?
Thanks, Marty. So let me briefly trace where we've been. In our first episode in this series, we explored how our problem-solution worldview limits what we can see and how we can respond. Like wearing blinders in a forest, when we approach any situation looking for problems to solve, we miss the vibrant web of life, the way healthy systems support struggling ones, how death and decay nourish new growth, how disturbance can ultimately strengthen the whole. We've discovered that this fixing mindset, while useful for changing a tire, becomes insufficient when applied to the complex living systems we are actually a part of. In the next episode, the last one we recorded, we revealed how this worldview profoundly affects our sense of belonging. We examined how duality, that either or framework where everything must be a hammer or a nail, good or bad, included or excluded, shrinks our awareness and literally prevents us from experiencing the totality of life. Marty shared this powerful insight from the Andean elder Don Manuel: if ego is active, there's no room for membership. We explored how true belonging isn't about fitting into categories, but about discovering our essential membership in the conscious universe itself. So today we're going to go deeper into what drives these patterns in the first place. Here's what we've discovered. How we see the world determines how we create meaning, which determines whether we think something is a problem to begin with. This isn't just philosophy, it has profound practical implications for how we lead, how we create, how we participate in life itself. Consider what happens when we put ourselves at the center of everything. From this position, we believe we're able to control and dictate outcomes. We become the focal point around which all events must be evaluated. Did this support my goals? Did this threaten my position? How does this reflect on me? The self-referential lens transforms the world into a collection of problems and solutions, with us either as the problem solver or the problem itself. This worldview creates so much suffering. We find ourselves constantly striving, efforting, measuring ourselves against standards that are fundamentally inhuman, machine-like in their demand for predictable outcomes and linear progress. We become trapped in self-criticism, always falling short of some imagined ideal of efficiency or achievement. This worldview also can lead us to see other people as problems to be solved or obstacles to be overcome. Our colleagues become sources of resistance. Our communities become challenges to our agenda. Even our own natural rhythms and responses become problems requiring correction. This tragedy is that when we see problems everywhere, we're looking at symptoms while missing the dynamics at play. A problem, by definition, is something we isolate, something discrete that can be extracted from its context and fixed. But the forces that actually shape our reality cannot be isolated because they are deeply interconnected, woven into the very fabric of how life organizes itself. These dynamics are like invisible choreographies, patterns of relationship and influence that move through everything. They're as real as gravity, though maybe we can't touch them directly. They shape how teams develop their particular culture, how communities respond to change, how forests regenerate after fire. They're present in the way birds move together across the sky, and how your presence changes the energy of a room, and the subtle electromagnetic fields your heart generates that interact with others around you. What we're pointing toward is a fundamental shift from seeing ourselves as separate agents operating on a world of objects to recognize ourselves as participants in these living dynamics. This isn't just about improving our relationships with other humans, though that certainly happens. This is about living in and responding to the connectedness that is always present, always influencing, always creating the conditions within which everything else emerges. When we step into this awareness, something remarkable can occur. Instead of constantly positioning ourselves as either the solution or the problem, we begin to explore and steward the workings of systems. We start to move with dynamics rather than trying to control. We discover what it means to participate rather than manipulate. This is relationality, not as a concept or strategy, but as a lived experience of belonging in the web of interactions that comprises reality. From this place, our actions arise not from the burden of having to fix everything, but from the joy of contributing to something larger than ourselves. Today, Marty and I want to explore these deeper dynamics together, how they operate, how we move with them, and what becomes possible when we become fully ourselves and unself-conscious in life's creative unfolding. Because understanding these invisible forces isn't just intellectually satisfying. It's not an explanation for everything that exists. It's essential for navigating the complexity of our time and for discovering what it truly means to lead from being. So let's dive in. Let's explore what lies beneath the surface of all of our problem solving, our striving, our efforts to control. Let's discover the dynamics that are present, always waiting for our conscious participation. Marty, where do we go from here?
Well, that was brilliant, Todd. Thank you for all of that. And it brings me over and over again to a concept from the Andean traditions, a teaching really, which is to source from our becoming, source from who we are becoming, not from who we have been. And when we talk about these deeper dynamics, we're really talking about, I'm going to use this word very loosely. We'll see if we can unpack it. We're talking about source. If you have something in front of you that looks like a problem or an obstacle, where's it coming from? What are the larger forces that are organizing energies and relationships and circumstances to generate something that looks like an obstacle to you? As long as we're only looking at the surface, this is what happened, I like it, I don't like it, we have no awareness of how things come into being. And you mentioned relationality, a lived experience. If we're living in our relationships to life, we do have an information stream coming into us all the time of how things are on the move, how things are coming together, how things are moving beyond that meeting. But we don't have the trained awareness to pick up the dynamics of our situation. We, in the Western culture, we tend to see our situations as utterly fixed. So I think the first thing, maybe let's play with a little image. Imagine yourself as a conduit, or imagine yourself, if you want it simpler, as a fountain, the big round kind that you see in old movies about Rome, and it's got a central spigot, right? And you're the fountain, and the universe moving through you is what creates the big water spray of the fountain. It comes up through you, and as it comes through you, it comes up and out in this huge, beautiful half dome of spray. But then the water goes back into you and it comes up again. So instead of I'm here as a fixed point. This is my fixed situation. I have to break it open or sew it up. Can you imagine the universe moving through you? And if you can do that, can you feel that as the universe emerges from that conduit in the middle of the fountain you are, can you feel yourself becoming moment to moment? Becoming. Yeah, this is, Todd, you called it life's creative unfolding. And each human is becoming moment to moment. And if we are aware in the moment of everything as it is, this is a principle of consciousness. If we're aware of everything as it is, that's not carved in stone. We're aware of everything as it is alive in the moment, and we're completely free to take an action on our own behalf, on our collective's behalf. We're not looking at something that is fixed and already done that we have to blow up or hide. So, source from who you're becoming, not from who you have been, means be completely present. And what Todd and I are both saying is that in that presence, I mean, if you're really present, we don't really need to say anything else because in that presence, there is a kind of knowing that a human being would have, a knowing of what is so, a knowing of the next action to take, a knowing of which relationships are fruitful, not fruitful, a knowing of what you're creating, who you are. And, you know, this, when we try to put this into simple English, it can sound like you kind of hear it and then it blows away like a whiff of smoke. But what we're trying to ask people, invite people into is a sensory experience of the moment. I think that's this principle of source is our gateway here. What does that light up for you, Todd?
The fountain in Rome, beautiful image. If we are the fountain, how are we not self-referential? If the universe is moving through us, doesn't that still put us at the center?
Oh, what a lovely question. We are at the center, but we're not thinking about ourselves. Do you have to think about the fact that you have 2 arms and 2 legs? No. We are simply being that conduit and paying attention to what flows through, not paying attention to ourselves.
Beautiful. So it's a difficult word to talk about source because we want to have a thingness to the source. We want to have an origin point, you know, the gold pot at the end of the rainbow. There needs to be describable entity through which things come.
Mm-hmm.
And what I feel like you are saying in this is that what if we removed the thingness from source
Mm-hmm.
and didn't ask like, well, what is the source and how should we talk about the source? What do we name the source?
We're talking about being. So here's what I want to do for just a minute. We've put on the table for today's feast this idea of sourcing from who we're becoming, not from who we have been. And we're suggesting that this is a state of awareness. We're suggesting it's a state of being in which you are focusing on the dynamics of your situation, not on things sitting in your limbic fear circuit, not on a mistake you made yesterday, not on what somebody else said they think of you, but you're in the moment responding to your own environment. Yeah. And in the Andean traditions, they go very deeply into this business, and they have names, words that name all the different powers and energies that a human being has to exercise and feed themselves with in order to be in the moment and source from who they're becoming. And they talk about our capacity to take action in life. And that's a capacity we have that we use to source from who we're becoming. And they talk about coming home to oneself. So you know your gift, you know your role in life, and you don't think about it. You just be you. Like a musician who really knows they're a musician. They don't have to say, oh my God, am I a musician every day? That's what they do. They speak through music, right? They be and relate through music. And they talk about the our physical vitality. They have a name for a certain kind of bioenergetic force that animates us day to day. And they say you have to fill yourself with that animating bioenergetic force in order to source from who you're becoming, to be in the moment. And you have to also understand what you know and have a way of articulating that, of saying what you know, sharing what you know, and learning in the moment from your experience, building your knowledge because you're present. And they also have, there's two other things here. One is the principle of blossoming, germinating and blossoming into states of fulfillment. They will ask you if you know what you are the seed of. Are you living your life to blossom the seed that is you? And if you're living your life to the fullest and in the moment addressing the challenges that come to you, that are gifted to you, you will be a beautiful expression of this principle of germination and blossoming into fulfillment. So the deeper dynamics of what we're talking about, if I'm just fixing a problem, I have a fixed problem because I'm sourcing from who I used to be. The only reason that thing is fixed is because it's resonating in my emotional self with something that I could not resolve. So the thing looks solid, it looks fixed, it looks like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But if I'm sourcing from whom I'm becoming and something like a challenge shows up, it's actually not a fixed obstacle, it's a dynamic challenge. And I take a look at it. And I can, knowing my purpose, I can take a look at the challenge and I can say, well, there's some energies that aren't meeting other energies very well, but those energies up in the left-hand corner, I can grab those and do something completely new. I'm sourcing from who I am becoming, not from who I've been. Yeah. And a big part of this also is this principle in the technologies of consciousness that we've talked about before. The Quechua word is munai, which means, in ordinary Quechua, it means to love or to like. But the principle, munai, is the capacity in full presence to be aware of everything as it is and let it be what it is. It's the capacity simply to know and let it be. And when you do take an action, you're taking an action to germinate the seed that you are. You're taking an action in service to your collective. You don't fix stuff. Things that are dying, you let them die because that's a cycle of life. You look for life positive things and you move into action where you can further blossom. And this power of Moonlight, the power of that kind of awareness and acceptance, that's what collective love feels like. That's what unconditional love feels like. And if we are aware in that way, we are sourcing in the moment from who we're becoming, not from who we have been. And so I would ask our listeners to think of any problem you've got right now. It might be I talk to a lot of people who have marketing problems right now because everything's changing so much out there. Are you beating your head against the wall of a marketing problem and moaning that it's not working the way it used to? What are you going to do now? Or are you actually taking a look at your situation on a big radar screen, take a look at your audience, talk to your audience, get new information in, find out, are there new seeds to plant? Be proactive in it. I really don't like that word, but it just came out of my mouth. In other words, these deeper dynamics of the things Todd and I have been talking about, the deeper dynamics say that living well and using challenges for growth, ceasing to look at the world as though it's just a big pile of problems, this involves our moment-to-moment participation in life, our moment-to-moment exercise of munai, our moment-to-moment remembering and exercising our capacity to blossom, and not just to blossom, but to make more seeds, to put more coordinates of potentiality out there while we're giving our gift into the world, to keep ourselves full of bioenergetic force so we're alive and healthy. Yeah, to tend to our attitude toward life. Are we available to life? Yeah. Do we appreciate our own special spirit and know that we belong, that we're supposed to be here? These are the deeper dynamics that keep us at source. And we're always moving from these big powers and big principles inform us. And so when we meet a challenge, it's no longer, oh my God, it's, oh, that's really interesting. What's on the move here?
I love that phrase, what's on the move here. And to resist the temptation to categorize what's on the move here, to come up with a framework to say, okay, now I can name what's on the move here, so I know what to do about it. The noticing, the tracking, the awareness of what's on the move may not have a verbal answer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a beautiful point, Todd, because the Western person's propensity, sort of habitual response to categorize, to name, to pin it down, the only way we can do that is use old information, sourcing from who we have been. Is this new thing I've never seen before like something that I know from my past? And that will stop you dead in your tracks right there. And all of a sudden, you've got immovable objects and obstacles and problems in front of you. But every moment is new. And if we live engaged in the present, the life changes radically. And we begin to be creators. We don't worry about problem solving. And I love what you said, Todd, about when we problem solve, we isolate a thing to solve it. And that isolates our consciousness and it isolates our spirit. And we can't live that way. When you live from source, I mean, imagine that we're all seeds in the ground. The source is something bigger. The source is the vitality and consciousness of the earth itself. And the earth is filled with a drive to create life. So if we're living at that level, we get filled with a desire to grow. In other words, I hear you and me talking about our need to be in relationship with larger powers, to be aware that there's a living universe that is feeding us energy and information, that has placed us here as part of a bigger thing. And that's another way to feel into the principle of source. Where do we come from? What's the ultimate thing that is on the move that is feeding everything else? And it's a marvelous level to live at.
What Marty shared over the last 5 minutes, there was a lot there. There was principles, there was teachings on dynamics, and I want to see if we can bring this into an everyday leadership context and set this up. We always struggle with how do we put language on this because language is inadequate for talking about what we're getting at here, but it's still fun, and this is a podcast, and so we have to use words. We're not taking a walk with you through the forest, or hopefully you are walking through the forest right now while you're listening to Leading from Being, but we're going to talk through this. So why don't we start with the default view of managing? And you know I don't like that word. How does one human typically help, direct, or support another in a leadership role? The default view goes something like this. When someone reports to you, you bear some responsibility for their performance. You set their goals or help them set goals. You help them overcome obstacles. You problem solve with them. And none of this is bad or wrong. It's just insufficient for helping people bring their fullest, most creative selves into their work. Many people who have managers can feel some level of nervousness before their weekly meetings or annual reviews. In this dynamic, The manager is often positioned as the one who supposedly knows best, someone who can push or pull you towards greater accountability and performance. In many cases, the person reporting to you is there because they have less experience, but that's not always the case. I want to talk about a different dimension of leadership, mentoring. We're making this distinction because many leaders rely on their position for authority or their knowledge for credibility. Mentoring is something else. It's more about creative partnership. As a mentor, whether it's formal or informal, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to help you see the world in a different way, and in doing so, see yourself differently. Great mentors aren't just drawing on their personal experience. They're connected to core principles. They understand that there are no easy answers to anything complex. So rather than solution seeking or obstacle overcoming, they're in relationship with you to invite you into being more powerful and more effective. A mentor could be a boss, a coach. It doesn't really depend on what position you're in. It's a special kind of relationship that forms with mutual consent, and it's often missing from leadership contexts. So maybe we turn this into a scenario. Marty, imagine you have someone reporting to you, and it's your weekly time to sit down across from one another in person or on video. How does this interaction change if you're acting as a mentor? What makes leading as mentoring different?
You're reminding me what I always tell people, because I'm always asked what's the difference between coaching and mentoring. And I always say, and I'm not trying to insult the coaches, but the process of coaching is more on the order of tell me what you want to do and I will help you do it. Be sure that you do it. The mentor is more on the order of I see who you really are, and I'm going to help you unfold into that being. And so Todd, we take your example. We're really talking about learning to become, I have only English language words to use, so try to feel what I'm saying. We're talking about a mentor helping the mentee learn to experience their own presence in the world, not their own presence with their ego, but their own presence in connection with the world. That's the first organizing principle of the technologies of consciousness. And with that presence, there comes, in connection with the world, then there comes the mentoring and how to unfold awareness so you realize you actually can be aware of everything as it is without trying to do something. You're just being informed. And in that state, you can pinpoint what is most relevant and empowered and fruitful for you to participate in. That's the second principle of the technologies of consciousness. And then the mentor helps the mentee to learn how to invest in those fertile coordinates. So we don't have to be aware of everything at once all the time, because then we would never focus. Then we learn to focus and we learn to invest our gift, our presence, our own genius in a coordinate in our world in order to produce multiplicities of benefit for yourself and for everybody else and everything else that's touched by your engagement. That's the third principle. And as we do this investing, we are making relationships that support that creative effort. And we learn all of the intricacies of those relationships. There are specific kinds. There are ones that are based in complementarities and ones that are based in similarities. There are other rules of relationship that need to be learned so you don't waste your energy on things that can't be brought together. But in the making of those relationships and learning the guiding principles of relationships, you find that you are actually creating a collective that supports your gift, needs your gift, supports your gift. And as you support the collective, they support you in turn. So that could be the company you work for. It could be your clients if you're an entrepreneur. your family, your community. So that's the next principle of consciousness. And so the principles go. There are more that have to do with specific levels of creativity and so on. But basically, the mentor is helping the mentee live in experience, to learn directly from experience. And the simplest example that shows up in my brain when I start talking about this is when you put your hand on a hot stove surface, do you need to get out a thermometer and measure the temperature and then Google how hot is too hot before skin burns before you know whether it's too hot or not? You know immediately through experience whether you can keep your hand on the warm stove or not. That's direct experience. That's experiential knowledge. And if we can get our awareness working in our moment-to-moment experience, then the mentor helps the mentee to open like a great unfurling of multiple dimensions of capacity and knowing and confidence and surety in one's identity, kind of coming home to yourself at the same time you know you're here to contribute. So the mentor, really, Todd, the way you and I talk about this, the mentor is the one who understands enough about consciousness and our humanity to help the mentee come into their own full consciousness and live from their humanity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if we go back to Munai, the mentor is also able to fully accept the mentee, the being as they are right now without judgment.
Yep.
And that is,
exactly.
Boy, if we just had a little more dose of Munai in the world, that alone would make a huge difference.
It makes an extraordinary difference. And then implicitly, if someone is exercising Munai in their relationship with you, you learn implicitly to do that with others. It just opens up in you because this is our innate intelligence. I'm going to use the word again. This is our source intelligence. Human consciousness innately is designed for connectivity and productivity. It's designed for us to be connected, to be present, to evolve together in the moment. That's what we're designed for.
I have another scenario. I'm in a scenario mode today, and this is a scenario of you are at a networking event. God help you if you go to a networking event. Not my favorite place to be, but we do those. So let's choose the networking event of your choice. It could be something that is more to your liking, maybe intermission at the theater or on a beach. But it's some sort of environment in which there are diverse groups of people who are coming together to see where there are connections and see where there's possible mutuality. So as you walk into this space, into this networking space, you are going to notice that you have certain visceral reactions. They may be quiet or they may be loud, and some of that could be related to fear, or some of that could be related to attraction. Like, I want to go over there because I'm attracted to that person's energy, or I want to avoid that corner of the room because something doesn't feel right. And I want to bring this up because when we talk about feelings and intuition, we're not talking about the fullness of dynamics. So your innate wisdom to avoid certain people and situations or being drawn to others is partially wired to your emotional reactivity. And there's something much greater than intuition that we can tap into, that if you are in any environment, you have a sense of where there's fertility that is not just based upon your limbic system or your sense of attraction, that you can move with those deeper dynamics. This is episode on deeper dynamics. So can you talk a little bit more about that, Marty?
Yeah, I love it. The let's put it this way. First of all, as humans, our biological design is such that we are receiving energy and information encoded in energy. We're receiving that from everything in the world around us 24/7, whether we know it or not. It's just happening. Your biological sensing systems are picking up energy, and that energy encodes information. And there's been research on our capacity to do this, and we actually pick up information within a radius of 5 miles. This has been discovered in waking brain surgery. There's all kinds of amazing stories. But the point is, you have a tremendous amount of knowledge within you that you have from experience alone, sensing experience. And when you walk into that room, if you're focused on why you're being there, your purpose for being there, you can learn to pick up the information about everything and everybody in the room as it is being delivered to you. So you instantly know what makes a person tick. You instantly know, you can see somebody who seems very well connected, and you can pick up what in them allows them that degree of connectivity. If you see someone who's a little bit shy or disturbed in the corner, you can pick up what is making them withdraw a little bit. You can find the best people for you, and you're not manipulating, you're simply paying attention as the world speaks to you. This is source, right? You're not consulting your thinking mind, you're not consulting your ego or your limbic system. You are in the direct experience of your environment. And you can only know from your environment through your senses if you are awake in a connected way. If you're not awake in a connected way, your awareness will pick up little bits of this information after the fact. And the only thing you'll be able to do is react yourself. And your own reactions are going to come from the emotional dimension of your consciousness. So you can be separate and reactive after the fact. And that's one way to think about how most people use intuition. That's another whole program, intuition. Or you can learn to be fully awake in the dynamic moment, picking up how things are coming into being, what makes a person tick, what has drawn people to the whole event that you're at, deeper information about what brought you there. So we're sourcing when we're fully conscious, when we are working from source, we're getting information about how things come into being, and we're also getting information about how those things could further unfold. So you might have an immediate impression of somebody as being a little sticky, but if you're really listening, that could be the person that you want to talk to. If you simply react emotionally, you're going to miss it completely. As a colleague of mine once said, when he bought a new Mercedes, I said, "Well, you must have raised your prices." And he said, "Oh, appearances can be deceiving." So this is really important. This capacity to work with the deeper dynamics of our lives, our experiences. We're listening for incoming data, literally. We're being informed by things on the move, not by an after the fact impression that's tweaked by our emotional reactivities. We're using a clear lens, not a distorted lens.
Beautiful. I want to go back to that reactivity for a moment. Because if we go back to the first scenario with the mentorship, and you're sitting across with somebody who you are, instead of just helping them be more effective, you're helping them become who they truly are, which will, in much greater order of magnitude, they're going to be more effective if they are being truly who they are, if they're bringing their gifts to play. A lot of us live in a perpetual state of reactivity. And there is great psychological tools out there for learning about reducing your levels of reactivity, working in a psychological and a biological way to reduce it. But I want to just perhaps offer something additional, that when you are in that state of presence and you are connected, that the reactivity becomes much less of a factor. And I hope this is an encouragement to all of our listeners to go further with this, because we're trying to treat the symptoms when we're trying to reduce our reactivity, instead of living from a different state of being that doesn't come with the baggage of reactivity that exists.
Well said. Really well said, Todd. Thank you for that.
I think it's important, especially we live in a highly reactive world right now, and people have noticed in me in various situations, like, how are you so not reactive? And I said, well, we need at least 15 minutes to talk about that, because it's not simple.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually experientially fairly simple, but there's a difference between having the experience and explaining the experience.
Yes.
And when we move to the explaining part of our human capacity, we're very much in the same region where reactivity lives. So, what Todd and I are saying, let's see if this helps. We are talking about deeper dynamics, but in the scope of the podcast, we're still having to stay fairly general about this topic. Basically, what we're saying is that to move out of a world that's full of problems and isolation and all the stuff we complain about, you basically have to find some way to unfurl your own consciousness. And that means living life from experience via your connections into the world. And that takes some training. And this business of are we reactive or are we in our experience? Do we have to explain everything and prove it to ourselves first or not? There's a moment that I would invite everybody to just go discover. And you are most likely 99.9% going to have to do this somehow in nature. It might be that you go for a walk on a beach, or it might be that you find the first trillium of spring blossoming in your forest, like happens for me. Something, the first ray of sunlight at dawn or the last one at sunset, something in nature that pulls your awareness off of your ego completely, and you are in awe for a moment. And if you can catch that moment, you are here. You, quote unquote, belong. You're not questioning yourself. You are just alive. And that's the state in which you can drop into these deeper dynamics of how life actually comes into being, how situations converge and emerge in your life, how you can engage for your own best growth and well-being, which will also be the best for your collectives. You've got to wake up in a connected state, trusting that your ego is better off without you sitting on top of it all the time.
So, we've referenced Munai as a principle and some other principles. In the interest of time, we're not diving into these principles very deeply. I want to build upon what we've already talked about, because this is partly a conversation about how we shift states of being. How we be influences what we do. And within Munai, this principle that's tied up with connection and connectivity and acceptance and seeing things as they actually are, we could also derive a truth from it that we try to interfere too much. So we interfere in relationships. We don't let things be as they are. We try to coax them into being what we think they should be, or what we want them to be, or what would be better for our interests. And so we have all of this, we employ all of this force of manipulation. And human beings just, they do that a lot. But so if we extract from, and this is an extraction, if we extract from Munai, well, interference is not good for life and humanity and relationships. So therefore, I am going to take a vow, and I'm going to work real hard, and I am going to effort to not interfere. And I am cheering you from the sidelines. Like, we need less interference. But in consistency with what we're talking about here, there's a more full and holistic way to not be interfering by entering this state of being where that non-interference is part of the state itself.
Right. Right.
Exactly. It's also why it's really hard to write books about full consciousness, because there's not necessarily steps you can take and an explanation that makes it all true for you. Though these principles do have nuggets within them, but please, listeners, don't just settle for the nuggets. There's a grand meal out there that can serve thousands.
Yeah.
If we move towards shifting our state of being, where our awareness is, that leads to our state of being.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so true. And this is just so important, Todd, what you've just said. And this, you're right. This, you've landed on the doorway that you can't get through by explaining it. And the very first thing in the whole history of humankind, the very first thing that the elders teach the tiny little children is how to experience their own awareness, how to experience being here as part of the big thing. That is the very, very, very first thing. We're not actually born knowing how to do that, especially not once we gain language, and some of our awareness has to be in the more linear parts of our brain. And so I think, Todd, this is our plea to our listeners all the time, is to seek out this moment of awe, this experience where you're not lifted off your feet, but you realize your feet have roots on the bottom of it, and you've got this whole rooting literally into the ground and connections into the nature around you and the sky above you. Find that moment of presence, because if you can be in that state, then the rest of the principles you will be able to experience. And that's when you start to understand the deeper dynamics of how those principles work and what we're really trying to talk about today. A short way of saying that is you can't think your way there, and you certainly can't reason your way there. You have to learn how to have your experience.
Well, I feel like that is the perfect transition point to move into our closing segments. Marty, you have a potentialities today, and you teased me with it, so I can't wait any longer. Please share.
All right. Yes, I have a potentialities today, and it's really, really relevant to our topic for the day. So,
potentialities.
I'm going to talk to you about humanity today. In part about our purpose, as a colleague of mine likes to call it, our job description in the greater scheme of things. I'm going to talk about our journey into consciousness and how to take that to realize our full potentiality. But most importantly, I'm going to talk to you about the gift, not so much of our humanity, but the gift that's been given to humankind. And it's a gift that we need in order to thrive. We have to learn how to receive it. So I was recently with colleagues in Peru, and we were on our annual research trip. And on this trip, I had a chance to ask a question that I've been wondering about for quite some time. And here's what I wonder about. There are many people that we know, and we include ourselves here, you, our listeners, colleagues and clients. If you have students, some of them may be this way. Some people you meet by chance. And these people I'm thinking about are the ones who are naturally resonant with the type of dialogue that Todd and I ignite for you when we're together here at Leading from Being. And we all know some people, on the other hand, who are not on the other hand. We know some people who are not shy. The people I'm talking about are not shy about the existence of spirit, or at least have an innate sense of their place in nature. Yeah. But here's my other hand. For each one of us, it can feel like there's probably hundreds of thousands of modern humans who haven't a clue what we're talking about and who are not tuned into nature and who might recoil at a mention of indigenous anything, let alone indigenous teachings. And I'm not judging, I'm stating an observation that there is a radically different, seemingly amazingly limited worldview out there that most of the people around us subscribe to. And then there's us, like tiny little lights in a dark sea. And so I asked one of the mentors in Peru about the few of us modern people who are different in this way, who naturally understand spirit or have visionary skills and are open to evolving our own consciousness. And I asked if they could see the original lineage that we actually come from. Is there a lineage beyond our modern biological lineages? Do we have a common source, in other words? And the answer was stunning. The answer was that at the dawning of humankind, there was an agreement made between humans and what I'm loosely calling spirit. And the agreement was that humans would always be in dialogue with a specific dimension of spirit, and that dimension always in dialogue with humans. In Peru, they call this the domain of the mountain spirits. You could think of it as a specific domain of universal consciousness. But whatever you call it, just try to absorb the fact that the agreement was between humankind and collective consciousness, that we would always be in dialogue, each learning from the other, informing the other, and both evolving together because of the dialogue. And it was made very clear that without the dialogue, humans would implode, humankind would implode on itself, and consciousness in our world would not evolve. And we've seen this over and over throughout the history of human evolution, right? And so the answer to my question was that the few of us for whom the experience of consciousness is natural, for whom experience itself is more encompassing than thinking or reason, we're the descendants of those humans who first entered into the agreement with the mountain spirits. We are like a silver thread in a rough weaving, and we're still there, and we're still visible, and we're still vital to the whole, and we need to believe in what we know and speak up. Now, I know this sounds like Hogwarts, right? But I was really reflecting on this remarkable answer, and I realized that these elders know what they're talking about, because in fact, in cultures around the world, we find records of a very clear awareness of the purpose of humans, which is to be the conduit for the wisdom and guidance and creative potentialities of the entire conscious universe. And we're supposed to use that power and knowledge that we gain in that constant dialogue with spirit to steward the evolution of consciousness itself, not just here in our world, but in those other dimensions. And it reminded me, this reflection, of a classic work by Peter Kingsley. It's his book titled Reality. in which he unfolds the story of Parmenides, who has been known for being the inventor of logic. Now, we're going to find out that logic was something else, but we're also going to find out that Parmenides really, his job was simply to be the messenger of spirit. And this is Kingsley translating the piece that Parmenides himself wrote about his story. Parmenides describes himself as being taken by a team of goddesses, the daughters of the sun, they were called. He was suddenly whisked away from his ordinary life and taken on a long journey by this team of goddesses down to the underworld, apparently summoned by an unnamed goddess who ruled the world of the dead. And it seems this goddess had summoned Parmenides to explain to him how life actually worked and what his human role was to be. Now, she made it very clear that thinking and reasoning, and thinking about thinking and reasoning, only carries humans away from a functional reality. She made it very clear that the sensory experience of life, not words or philosophies, but just the extraordinary richness of sensing and knowing directly via experience, that this was the only reality in which humans would come together as a functioning collective to thrive and fulfill their role as messengers and stewards and creators. And she made it very clear that Parmenides' only job was to take her words directly to the world of the living and pass them on. To tell people the goddess says you must live and experience. He was not to think about it or try to reason it through or disguise it in explanation. He was not to pause. He was to begin immediately. Now, this is the same original instruction. This is how it appears in our Western civilization, that instruction about reality and our role in it. It's the Western version of the Andean lineages teaching us how to assemble a reality that has enough space for us to take our place in the greater scheme of things and thrive as members of the living universe. In Peter Kingsley's words, he says, "This is what logic used to be." It was the message from the goddess. This is what logic used to be. It was a fine, fine thread connecting us with another world, a gift from the gods, a magical lure drawing us into oneness. It was before people learned how to use reasoning as a mask to disguise their terror of logic. It was when logic meant the word and the wisdom of spirit, the wisdom held in universal consciousness that we are meant to use for our collective evolution. So I think we have to ask ourselves, as they ask us in the Andes, are we looking for a description, an explanation, reasons, or are we seeking to have our experience? Are we demanding to know what it is and how it's going to be before we try something new? Or have we discovered that in conversation with the greater natural world around us, we're actually being carried into new experience moment to moment, and this is our best life? Now, you don't really have to understand or be comfortable with the notion of mountain spirits and goddesses for this to click in your consciousness. You just need to be in sensing awareness and allow yourself to develop an appreciative relationship with nature. Or you may be more awake to energies if you have a way of sensing and being in relationship with the amazing world of energy from which everything rises into form. That would do. But however you step into this bigger relationship, it has to be with powers bigger than your ego. So can you feel your membership at that larger scale? Beyond your ego, way beyond your ego? Can you feel the real magic and scope of human potentiality when we're living as part of the greater whole? Can you feel, I always ask my students, can you feel that this is a technical issue? It's not subjective. It's not about us being good or bad. It's about us learning the technologies of our own consciousness. You know, when Arthur C. Clarke said any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic, he was talking about our consciousness. It's technical and it's magical. And the Yaqui elders then, they pop up and they say the magic of being human is the act of awareness, which means the act of being aware of our own experience, our dynamic experience. So the key to understanding our humanity and understanding how to receive the universe's biggest gift to us, it really comes down to our willingness to live in dialogue with the natural world, not with the ego. What this really comes down to is our willingness to be awake within our own experience, not standing outside it trying to explain stuff or prove stuff to ourselves, but being in our experience, which is a connected thing, moment to moment. You can't be aware of your experience if you don't have awareness in your connections to the world. Can you imagine, as Don Eduardo Calderon put it, being a conduit for all the beauty and vibrant energies the universe has to offer? Can you imagine that? When I feel Eduardo's words, they always spark a flow of energy in me. I feel just lit up. I feel the depth of the human purpose and the infinite potentiality of our creative role in the very big scheme of this thing called life. I feel the magic of our potentiality. And this conversation, this dialogue that we're supposed to be in, it's a gift to humanity. And all it needs is our awareness flowing into it to come to life. And the whole thing works better if we do it together.
Wow. I'm not sure if listeners or Marty could hear in the background that we are having a thunderstorm move through during the entire potentialities segment, but it's very fitting. There was thunder and lightning and sustenance rain.
That's beautiful. It is in many cultures considered to be the speech of Creator, thunder and lightning and rain. So that's wonderful.
Wow. Marty, it's time for takeaways. What have you taken away from today that you want to share?
Wow. Well, one of my big takeaways is the beauty of the introduction that you gave us. And I want to invite everybody to listen to Todd's introduction, I don't know, a dozen times. We've managed, I think, in these three dialogues to put forth something so profound, it can only be felt. So I think the power in general of what we've said today and the feeling state that we're urging people to find a way to enter, I think we pulled out all the stops today. That my big takeaway is the big thing that we've done. And what about for you, Todd? What's your takeaway?
I have a stoplight. So I have a red, a yellow, and a green.
Oh,
and
okay.
the red is stop doing everything alone and stop thinking so much. Now, I want to leave that as red because that's that may be helpful, but it doesn't get us very far. We need to go somewhere. So yellow, when you listen to this episode and this series, actually, I would invite you not to try to pick apart, diagnose, pull out specifics, and just let the whole thing wash over you like you're sitting on that fountain in Rome.
Yeah.
That's the yellow. And the green, with your potentialities segment, there was so much profundity there. But I was remembering actually wiring fiber optic cables on a ranch and pulling the conduit through. That there's this sense of we are creating this area of connectivity, but it involved hands-on labor, digging and pulling, and it's such a thrilling experience to have your hands in the soil, and then it's also such a thrilling experience to be able to utilize technology in such a way that it opens up new possibilities. In this case, it was this magnificent connectivity on this ranch. And that conduit, there's something about that potentialities segment that I think points to what I hear a lot is the planet would be better off if humans died.
Mm-hmm.
And that segment was a solid no to that. That we have a gift of stewardship that doesn't just, it's not about obligation, it is about potentiality. And we're not just stewarding the living things on this planet, we have the chance to steward consciousness. And that just lifted my spirits, and I was doing a little dance in the thunderstorm.
Oh, that's brilliant. I'm going to hold that image in my heart for a long time. Beautifully said, Todd, beautifully said. And that potentialities piece also, I want people to remember that the possibilities for humankind are job description. As the goddess said to Parmenides, the big job description is to be in that dialogue with the bigger conscious universe. We cannot steward if we separate ourselves out as some sort of different species.
Yes.
Yeah, so like Todd
and
said, go ahead.
That is relationality.
Yes,
It's not just relations between humans, it's relations between us and the living world, the forces that move through the living world, the relationality. When we make that only between humans, we're missing out on the power of it.
Yeah. So well said, Todd. Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners for being with us in this deep, magical session. We really appreciate you being with us today here at Leading from Being, and look forward to speaking with you again very, very soon. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, listeners.
Get out into nature, and until next time.
Thank you for listening to Leading from Being. You can learn more at leadingfrombeing.com, including contact information for Marti and Todd. Our theme song is courtesy of Cloud Cult.